Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It is a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. Still a little overcast, but very pleasant. The sun is starting to push through a little, so I would describe the feeling as almost sunny. Not quite, but pretty close. So today I will be talking about some games I've played recently. That's right, it's time for a shooting from the hip triple shot. For those of you new to the podcast, shooting from the hip triple shot is a mini review segment in which I talk about 3 games I've played recently, usually for the first or maybe first and second time. These aren't reviews specifically so much as like first impressions reviews, so I could be totally wrong about the game. You know, maybe after 3 plays it's terrible, or after 3 plays it's amazing, but I wouldn't know that because I've only played 1 or 2. I might play it later and come back for a message from the deep, in-depth review, but for now, this is what you get. So the 3 games I'm playing, if you were listening in the Top of the Stack episode, they're the 3 games that I played toward the end of August, so they would have been at the end of the list of games I played in August. And here they are in the order that I played them. First up is Fleet, the dice game. This is a roll and write from Matt Riddle and Ben Pinchback, published by Eagle Griffin Games. This has the same cover art as Fleet, the card game, but and the same theme, but that's where the similarities stop. Whereas Fleet, the card game, is a deck builder, Fleet, the dice game, is a checking boxes combo builder, combo-tastic roll and write. Riddle and Pinchback are sort of famous for, or I guess have become known particularly for their last couple games that have been combo-tastic roll and writes, particularly Fleet, the dice game, and then more recently 3 Sisters. If you've played 3 Sisters, you're going to see, or having played 3 Sisters, as I started to play Fleet, the dice game, I definitely saw the ancestry, the bones of 3 Sisters in Fleet, the dice game. So let's talk about how that works. Like 3 Sisters, you get 2 sheets next to each other that depict a variety of things that you can interact with. One of them is a sheet showing the different ships or boats, fishing vessels that you have in your fleet. And the other one shows sort of the harbor, which has a number of different buildings that you can interact with. On your turn, you're going to roll a couple dice. I believe it's number of players plus 1, if I recall. I played it a couple weeks ago, so I might get some of these details wrong, but you'll get the gist. You're going to roll a couple dice, and the first player chooses and drafts one of those dice to use. The other player chooses and drafts, let's say you're playing 2 players, so you roll 3 dice. First player chooses and drafts 1 die. Second player chooses and drafts another die. And then both people get to use the 3rd die. So every turn you're using 2 dice. In a 4-player game, there would be 5 dice rolled, etc. Now the dice have several different symbols on them, and the different symbols allow you to do different things. Some of the symbols allow you to advance or start ships in the fleet of a particular type of fish. So maybe you would have not fish isn't maybe the right word because I'm about to talk about crab, but seafood that you're fishing for. So if you took a die that's got cod, then maybe the cod row you can work on. If you took one of the other kind of fish, a crab, you would work on a different row. And the idea is, as you're going along, you're checking boxes which activate different ships in your fleet. And as you start, you have to acquire licenses, and the licenses then will allow you to go fishing. And then as you continue to check off things, then you're getting higher capacity for your fleet. There are occasionally fishing moments. Basically, in between some of the rounds, there's a fishing phase in which all of your ships that are available in your fleet will go out and catch a certain number of fish. You then mark off the fish that you've caught on your total fish caught area, and that's another place where you're keeping track of things. Now, what makes Fleet, the dice game, so interesting is the same thing that makes 3 Sisters interesting, which is the cascade of combos. So as you're playing Fleet and you're checking off boxes, you will often check off a box that has an award or a reward of some sort or a bonus of some sort next to it. And when you check off that bonus, you then get to check off usually another box related to that bonus. And those bonuses can cascade. So you could have one bonus that allows you to check off a box that gives you another bonus that allows you to check off some more boxes, and so on. The acceleration of this checking off of things means that as you move toward the end of the game, you've got this massive pile of things going for you. In addition, as you catch fish, every 5 or 10 fish that you catch, you get another bonus that you can use to check off another box anywhere on the board. Now this is very similar to the gardening bonus on the bottom of the sheet in Three Sisters. Same thing, as you're gaining these sort of gardening points, when you reach a certain level, I think every 5, you get a star, and that star then allows you to check off any box anywhere on the board. Now I would say of the two, Three Sisters is more combo-tastic than Fleet, which is sort of explained by the fact that Three Sisters actually gives you a spot to write down what combos you're doing so that you can keep track of how well you're doing on those. But generally, you don't need that until toward the end of the game. Now in Fleet, we never needed that at all, although there did get to be a couple rounds where it was sort of like, I feel like I've used all my things, but I have to look back at what I did this turn to make sure I did in fact use all my things. Usually what I would do is when I had activated the bonus, I would then cross off that bonus as well, so I can kind of see what's been used. You know, all in all, Fleet, the dice game is very good. In terms of its difference from Three Sisters, not too different. I mean, they are different, they play differently, and they have different nuances. But generally, I would say they're very similar games. I probably, if I were going to a game night, and I thought, you know, maybe we'd like a combo-tastic game, I would bring either Fleet or Three Sisters, but probably not both. That said, I like them both, and I'm not gonna remove one from my collection anytime soon. So that's Three Sisters from Matt Riddle and Ben Pinchback, that's Fleet the Dice Game from Matt Riddle and Ben Pinchback, and Eagle Griffin Games. So the next game I want to talk about is Boonlake. Boonlake is the newest big box game from Alexander Pfister. It's published by Capstone Games, and it involves a long rondelle similar to the path that you take in Great Western Trail. And it also involves a tiny little sliding area on your own board where you can keep track of which resources you have access to. So in Boonlake, you are one of up to 4 groups of settlers building a new community in an abandoned land. The game setup is very specific that this is an ancient abandoned land. There's no one here, and so therefore settling here isn't colonialism, it's just rapacious capitalism, I guess. I appreciate the thematic effort, honestly. If the choice is Boonlake, a fictional place where there's nobody living where you go, and Mayflower, where you're landing and settling in North America, and implied or not, the indigenous people who live there are removed, are erased, or their stories are ignored, Boonlake is better. It does replicate the ideas in those other games, so it's a bit better. It's not the most better from terms of a theme, but in terms of gameplay, super fun. I really enjoyed it. So in Boonlake, like I said, you are settling this land, and you do so by putting tiles out that gain you resources, by putting out buildings in a sort of Terra Mystica style, where as you put out buildings, you uncover bonuses that help your income. You also can put out cows, and the cows help your income in certain ways. There's a board of bonus tiles that you can get, and so during the game you can decide to buy a tile that you'll add to this board, and then it gives you a bonus that you can use once per round, and it gets reset occasionally. The thing that makes the game interesting and unusual compared to these other games is the action selection mechanism. So there's a set of 7 tiles, I think, and they're in a column, and on your turn you can pick one of the 7 tiles to execute. The bottom 2 tiles are free to execute, and then as you go up the stack, they become more and more expensive to execute. So the game motivates you to try to use one of the bottom ones if you can. When you use the tile, I bet you can see where this is going, you then remove it from the column and slide the whole column down, and you put the tile you removed at the top of the column. So you have this situation where, like, if you use the tile I wanted to right before me, then on my turn that tile is going to be very expensive to use. So I probably will do something else. I've only played this once, and it was in a 2-player game, so it's hard for me to say exactly how this process affects the larger experience. That if players, I've heard in other reviews the idea that maybe you want to do one particular thing and you never get to because other players always grab it first. That might be an element that doesn't really emerge in the 2-player game. The other element that's really interesting is the spot where you took the tile from also gives you a number of movement points, and those movement points you apply to your ship. You have this little ship that is sailing down a river, and as you move, you can't land on the same spot as someone else on the river, and you must move your ship down the river, but you move it down the river, minimum of 1 space up to like 4 spaces or something. And as you move down the river, that's the clock for the game. So, and the clock is the person who moves down the river fastest. So if the leader, the person in front going down the river, gets all the way down the river, does 2 laps on the board, reaches the end of the river, game's over. Doesn't really matter how fast or slow other players were going. This is one of the things that I find really interesting, which I haven't had the chance to explore yet, which is this dynamic. Because when my wife and I played, we felt like there was plenty of time to get everything. We got lots of stuff. We built lots of things on the board. We kind of maxed out our points. But we were using our boats to try to get as much as we could, to kind of take as many turns as we could. And it made the game pretty long. I guess the interesting element of that is that if you as one player start leaping ahead and taking 3 or 4 moves per turn instead of 1 move per turn or 2 moves per turn, you can make the game go a whole lot faster, and it changes the dynamic of the game. Like it adds dramatically to the tension because you really don't have time to do everything. So Boonlake has this interesting lever that you can pull where as a group of players, you can give yourself plenty of time to do everything, but that's not really the way the game is designed. The game is designed to function quickly. The components are really nice. It's a difficult teach. There's a lot going on. But I really liked Boonlake, and it's definitely taking a spot in my collection. I don't know how often I'll get to play it, but my wife did say she enjoyed it, so hopefully it will come out again at home. That's Boonlake from Alexander Pfister and Capstone Games. So the last game I wanted to mention today is Tichu, T-I-C-H-U, from Urs Hostetler and Abacus Spiel. Tichu is a famous trick-taking game that I have been wanting to play for like 6 years. And so I'm very happy to have gotten it played. I think I mentioned in my top of the stack that a friend brought it to Toggle Gaming and we played it there. It was a delight, just a delight. So a little bit about Tichu. It is a trick-taking game. There are a couple special cards that influence the way that the game works, but then there are also a variety of, on your turn you get to play cards in a variety of ways. You could play a single card, you could play a pair, you could play 2 pair or 3 pair, but those have to be in order, so you could pair a pair of 2s and a pair of 3s. You could not play a pair of 2s and a pair of 6s, for instance. You could play a full house, you could play a run of 5 cards, I think, it has to be 5. And all these things together result in a nice variety of different ways that you can play your cards. Your goal in the round is for your team, the 2 players sitting across from each other, it's a 4-player game, to get rid of your cards first. When you get rid of your cards first, the cards that are left in the hands of your opponents become points for you, and that's kind of the way the game goes. You go until you get 500 points, or 1,000 points. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do. That was just the barest teach of it. Suffice to say, it's a ladder-style trick-taking game that I had a great deal of fun playing, and I hope I get to play again soon before I forget how to play it. But it's finally off my shelf of shame, and ta-da. So, that is Tichu. So, what have you been playing lately? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know. I appreciate your listening to the podcast, and I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye. Access to. If you were wondering what a dump truck dumping out tons and tons of rocks sounds like, now you know.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.